The first shudder felt like turbulence, a quick rattle underfoot, and then the left side of the cabin shook hard enough to slosh coffee across tray tables. A sour, oily smell blew through the vents. Passengers looked up as the Boeing 737 began to tremble in pulses, the sound rising and falling like someone sawing through metal. The plane banked slightly, leveled, and then the smell came again. Hot, chemical, wrong. A flight attendant steadied herself and told people to stay seated. Up front, 2 throttles moved, one sliding back as the captain tried to calm a sick engine. Through the windshield, the winter night over central England was a black pane of glass. Beneath it ran the lights of the M1 highway, a river of red and white. The pilots turned toward an airport they could just make out in the distance. It was supposed to be a straight-in emergency landing. Minutes later, British Midland Flight 92 hit the earth short of the runway and broke open on the highway embankment near Kegworth. 8 days into 1989, British Midlands Flight 92 lifted off from London, headed for Belfast. The airplane was a near-new 737-400, a stretched, updated version of Boeing's workhorse with upgraded CFM56-3C1 engines and modernized cockpit displays. Captain Kevin Hunt and First Officer David McClelland climbed the jet toward cruise. Weather was cold and clear. As the aircraft climbed through about 28,000 feet, engine vibration surged on the left side. Inside the cabin, that translated into a violent buzz and the sharp smell of burning. The captain throttled back to reduce strain. The vibration eased, then it returned. Crew training teaches pilots to diagnose engine trouble by instruments, sound, and feel. On the new -400, a vibration gauge on each engine showed spikes, a tool designed to remove guesswork, but Hunt and McClelland were still getting used to how the new display worked. Meanwhile, the cabin's climate system was drawing bleed air from the right engine, carrying fumes from the fault across the cabin and making it seem like the right side was the culprit. Up front, a quick reduction on the right throttle smoothed the ride. The crew believed they had identified the failing engine. They shut the right engine down and pointed the airplane to East Midlands Airport, the nearest runway aligned with their flight path. The left engine, which had actually been the one shedding metal, was left running at reduced power. The captain declared an emergency and began a descent toward the lights just ahead. Air traffic control cleared them direct. In the cabin, people watched a flight attendant move low and steady as luggage bins popped and latched back. The pilots ran checklists, secured the right engine, and configured for an expedited approach. Everything depended on the left engine holding together for a few more minutes. The core of the failure was deep inside that left engine. Investigators later found a fan blade had fractured from metal fatigue triggered by a vibration mode not fully understood in service on the new variant. The 737-400's longer, heavier fan and its nacelle installation meant that at certain power settings the blade experienced resonant flutter. It cracked, failed, and the engine surged, compressor stalls that came and went like someone hitting a drum. Throttling back helped, temporarily. The crew needed thrust for landing, though, and an idle approach was impractical. They would have to push the left engine again. The approach unfolded like a tightrope walk. The 737 turned toward final for East Midlands. The runway lights stood out crisp against the dark countryside. With the right engine secured, the captain advanced the left throttle to stabilize the glide path. The engine responded, and then failed catastrophically. Fire and vibration spiked. With one engine off and the other dying, the airplane lost lift and sank. The pilots kept it aimed for the runway, but the jet was too low, too soon. At 8:24 p.m., Flight 92 struck the shoulder of the highway embankment, less than a mile short of the runway. The nose sheared off. The fuselage broke into sections. Seats tore free. The cabin ripped open. A wing separated, and the remaining fuel flashed into fire. Drivers on the M1 jammed brakes and scrambled out of cars into a sudden storm of aluminum, glass, and snowing insulation. People who could move clawed at seatbelts, crawled into the cold night, and helped strangers down the broken slope of the cabin wall. Fire crews, medics, and police who had staged for the incoming emergency poured onto the scene within minutes. They pulled survivors through jagged door frames, cut through floorboards, and set up triage on the asphalt. The wreck sat tilted on the embankment, smoke rolling past blue lights, the runway lights visible just beyond. 47 people died, and dozens more were seriously injured. The flight deck crew survived, but were badly hurt. The accident rattled a country that had watched air travel become routine. It also cut directly into how modern crews diagnose and handle engine failures, especially on updated models with new instrumentation and different behavior under load. The Air Accidents Investigation Branch reconstructed the flight from cockpit voice recordings, data traces, wreckage, and engineering tests. Piece by piece, they mapped a chain that began with a fan blade fatigue failure in the left engine and turned deadly when the crew, misled by cockpit cues and cabin fumes, shut down the healthy right engine. Once committed to East Midlands on one engine, the pilots needed to increase power on the remaining left side. When they did, the already damaged engine broke apart internally. The jet no longer had enough thrust to stay on the glide path. The report did not stop at cockpit error. It called out design and training gaps that set the crew up to fail. The new -400's vibration indicators were unfamiliar and their presentation easy to miss under pressure. The engine's stall behavior produced fumes that the air system sent into the cabin from the opposite side, a human factor trap that pointed attention to the right engine. Company training had not fully prepared crews for the -400's differences or emphasized the discipline of confirming both engine parameters before committing to a shutdown. The report also flagged the need to physically feel for throttle lever vibration. On that night, the left throttle reportedly shook when advanced, a tactile cue that might have been decisive if recognized in time. The engine maker faced its own reckoning. Tests showed the CFM 56-3 C1 fan could enter a specific resonant mode at the power settings used during climb and approach. Strength margins assumed in development had not captured the exact stresses of that mode on new installations. The fix included changes to the fan, operating guidance to avoid the narrow danger zone of settings in which flutter could start, and updates to cockpit procedures. Regulators issued bulletins to airlines worldwide. Simulators were updated to force crews to practice engine malfunctions in ways that match the 400's realities. Checklists and callouts were tightened to require positive identification, confirming the bad engine with multiple instruments before pulling a fire handle. From the highway, the disaster looked like a plane that missed its runway by a few thousand feet. Underneath, it was a system failure with human hands on the last link. Pilots trained on one model stepped into an updated cockpit with new gauges and new behavior. A blade cracked in a way developers had not fully anticipated. Fumes bled into the cabin from the opposite side. Under stress, people reached for familiar patterns. In an older 737, cues might have aligned. On the -400 that night, they misled. The result was an airplane descending toward the lights of safety with the wrong engine shut down. Families and survivors carried the aftermath. Hospital wards filled with burns, fractures, and smoke inhalation. Funerals ran through the following week. A memorial rose near the site, a quiet place just off the highway where traffic noise never quite fades. For first responders, the scene stayed vivid. The hiss of leaking hydraulics, the sting of jet fuel, the shock of an intact runway visible across a field of flashing lights. Aviation changed because of Kegworth. Engines were modified. Procedures were rewritten to force verification, not assumption. Training emphasized how new variants can behave in unexpected ways and how cockpit resource management must slow a crew down long enough to confirm what their senses are telling them. The accident became a case study. Don't let a familiar playbook outrun the machine you're actually flying. On a winter night in 1989, a short emergency diversion became a test of design, training, and human judgment. The test was failed in minutes. The lessons have lasted decades. The lights of East Midlands were close enough to count. The difference between almost and enough came down to a single throttle pushed forward on the wrong engine at the worst possible time. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.